Bravo for the 2006 3-hour epic film of a nightmare, I presume. David Lynch, Inland Empire. Wow. I have not seen this film, I'm ashamed to say, since 2006. 16 years ago. I watched this movie on the big screen, the only other time I've seen it, and it registered then as a powerful film. I was nearly just knocked out, overwhelmed. I viewed the film with a girlfriend at the time, and of course we were fooling around a little bit during the movie in some of the parts that weren't full of action. It's not an action movie by any means. It's a film that will take you, into another dimension. It starts even unconventionally, and there's a lot of close face-up shots, facial shots, head shots in the film, mostly of Laura Dern. Laura Dern being the star of the film, and of course there's some other great actors in the film, and I think it's a tremendous movie, a film that really ought to be seen on the big screen for the most part, really, as all films should be, but David Lynch films in particular are way better on the big screen because oftentimes they have so much dark shadows, that kind of thing in the film, that you just miss it if you're just watching it on a TV screen. You miss it all. You really don't get to take it in. So I'm going to give you my little capsule review here of the film as I move along here at Twist and Shout. I saw it down at the C Film Center here in Denver on Colfax. This is a street I used to go hang out on at 4 and 5 in the morning back on the old days of the graveyard shift and visit the Tattered Cover when it was open. But you know, it's 1 o'clock in the morning now, so everybody's closed up. But let me just say a few things about Inland Empire. It is a film that, it's sort of like a nightmare. It's really, in a lot of ways, his most strange and dark and murky film. Very, very visual, this film. In fact, the whole last hour, there was very little dialogue. There was a lot, even some of the dialogue they had were subtitled. And there was an awful lot of just imagery to soak up. It's strange because we don't know sometimes what is supposed to be portrayed as real and what in the film is supposed to be a dream, a nightmare kind of thing. You know, has our central character, Laura Dern, who plays an actress, an actor, a woman who's starring in a movie, but then where does the movie begin and end, and where is it her real life? You know, she's just kind of out there on a wing in the dark sometimes. And the film has elements, I think, that were even more strange in some ways than Eraserhead, which actually is a more commercial film in many respects, had much more commercial success on the midnight circuit than Inland Empire. Has been on some critics' lists, it ranks pretty high. On other lists I see by film goers, like IMDb kind of thing, it doesn't rank very high. Inland Empire gets sort of a low rating, but I think it deserves much higher rating in the canon of David Lynch, who's made just, a number of films, I think less than 15 films. So this movie is closer to Lost Highway in a lot of ways, but in many respects even stranger than Lost Highway, although that's a really odd one too. And these films open themselves up to a lot of interpretation as to what is the significance. I believe David Lynch explores through the Laura Dern character in the film, Susan, femininity in a whole different way than normally we see it in Hollywood films. Femininity is glossy, it's supposed to be very commercialized, almost plastic, sexy, bright, technicolor, all this kind of stuff in most Hollywood films. David Lynch explores the eroticism that women can display at times, and also their masculine side that oftentimes is hidden in modern day films or even in culture at large. Women don't really go around wanting to expose and exploit their masculinity, but he does delve into that with Laura Dern's character. A lot of her facial images has almost a masculine quality about it, but in a very beautiful way. She's still very feminine, very, very lovely woman with very unique features. And I just love the way he captures that, the essence of her movement, and a number of the other women in the film. David Lynch just has a sense about the sensual, spiritual, and mystical side of femininity of women that most filmmakers don't even have a clue about. I think the ones that would come closer would be someone like Fellini, perhaps, Fassbinder, maybe, some of the European directors, but certainly most American filmmakers don't, just don't get it the way David Lynch does with his vision. And this film, it's eerie, it's creepy at times, it catches you off guard. There are a few moments in the film that are frightening, literally scared me. And I didn't really remember much of it, except that when I saw it the first time, I was just like, I knew that I had had an experience that was tremendous, but I couldn't explain what I was feeling afterwards. And I almost have a similar feeling tonight, that I'm gonna have to digest and mull this over a little bit. I haven't read any critiques or criticism by other critics to know what anybody else's opinion about the movie is, so I couldn't tell you, and it's irrelevant. It doesn't even matter to me what anybody else thinks about the movie. I've elevated this film to a higher standard or higher level, and I'm going to watch it again on my home DVD at some point, and I'm hoping it has subtitles, because I missed a lot of the dialogue. It's cupping my ears a lot, because a lot of the dialogue, it was shot on digital video, not on film. And then the film was later enhanced again digitally and everything, and transferred to 35 millimeter. And so it really looks good, but it's not like a digital film you see today, the Blu-ray type films you watch at home, or the films 4K and all this kind of thing. It has a different kind of a grainy quality to it overall. And I think it was just basically mesmerizing. For the most part, I was enthralled with the movie. I was captivated. It was one of the fastest 3-hour movies I've ever seen in my life. I did check the time one time just to see where I was in the movies, because I had to take a little bathroom break. And then so I go home and see what part I missed on my DVD. But basically, the film captures in the early part of what filmmaking is like, making a movie, what directing and acting is like. But then we take off from that tangent and go in a totally different direction. The film really is not so much about making a movie, but representing the idea, I think, that our life is like a movie, and that we're in the movie. And, we basically at sometimes don't understand that life has many parallels to being in a film, or film has more parallels to life, I should say, is more accurate. And that when you watch a film, most of the time, it's a representation of life that's very artificial and very one-dimensional or two-dimensional at best. Of course, it's on a two-dimensional screen. It's very two-dimensional. David Lynch's film actually goes beyond three-dimensional. It's almost a 4 or 5-dimensional film that takes us into, alternate multiverse type universes, because there's like parallel life experiences that could be a dream or it could be real. We don't really know. It's very abstract. The film is leaving a lot up to the interpretation of the filmgoer, the viewer. We're sitting back and just being washed over with different images, displayed to our eyes and to our ears. The sound editing in it was tremendous. It was a great soundtrack too. I look forward to listening to the soundtrack. A couple of the songs David wrote himself. There were some by Penderecki. There's a lot of Polish actors in the film, and Polish being spoken, which I enjoy. I love the Polish language, how it's spoken. It's such a beautiful language, really is. And some of the old familiars from David Lynch films were in the film. Justin Theroux and Jeremy Irons is in the film. Harry Dean Stanton. We see Grace Zabriskie from Twin Peaks in the film. And of course, there's a consistent aspect to the film that we see in all David Lynch movies that have this dreamlike quality. David Lynch was asked, I think in an interview one time, does he get his ideas for his films from dreams? And I thought he did. I mean, I was pretty sure that he got his ideas from dreams, but he claimed he doesn't. He claimed that he gets his ideas from daydreams. Some of his ideas in his films come from daydreams, he claims, but not actually so much from dreams themselves. And I thought that was really interesting, that, you know, David Lynch is famous for doing transcendental meditation and promoting that, and world peace recently, and calling for that kind of thing, which we all would like to see, I know. And I think with his deep transcendental meditation, that probably opens himself up to the daydream type thing that he's talking about, where he has really vivid dreams in an awake state, that he goes to catch the big fish. And he wrote the book that's beautiful, Catching the Big Fish. I don't know if that's the exact title, but it is a book about where ideas are out there in this realm of the sea of consciousness that's all around us all the time, the universal collective consciousness of the world that Carl Jung talked about. And David Lynch goes fishing for these ideas, and he comes up with some tremendous big ones, big ideas that I think elude most of us because we're so fixated on this physical world, looking around like, you know, this is where I am, in a parking garage. But you know what? A parking garage is kind of surreal. I've walked in them many times during the years I worked night shift and I was up all night. I would come out to the parking garage and just like this and wander around with nobody out here. And I could see and do things that you never could do in the daytime when there's a lot of people around and it's busy and it's light and bright. David Lynch films are dark. They're not, this film, Inland Empire, is very dark. Most of it takes place at night. And I was just enthralled with the movie, I gotta tell you. I really was just flabbergasted, thinking, why isn't Inland Empire talked about more in the canon of his films? You know, why do people kind of relegate it to lower on the list? I don't know. People don't think Dune is one of his worst movies. I don't agree. I don't think he has a worst movie. I wouldn't even begin to rank them. I mean, I do have my favorites. Of course, Eraserhead is up near the top, and Mulholland Drive, and I even love The Straight Story. And, you know, there are some of his other films I haven't seen in a while. I plan to revisit in the near future. But I am just so thrilled that I got to go see Inland Empire tonight. And it was quite a crowd there. I mean, it was not in a big theater. So I would say the small theater that we were in, maybe 30 seats, there were about 20 people. So it was a pretty good audience considering the size of the theater. And it was really quiet. There was only one scene that elicited a chuckle. I kind of chuckled a couple times at the scene when the director is trying to instruct one of his crewmen to do something, and it's focused on Jeremy Irons, the movie director, and we hear this voice. It sounded like David Lynch's voice, or sort of like a person that was mumbling, and you couldn't make out what they were saying, and it was incoherent. They're like, rah, 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 rah. And I just thought it was hysterical. So I laughed out loud, and then as soon as I laughed, a few other people laughed too and broke the tension in the theater. But otherwise, yeah, it was a movie where we were just sitting there really absorbing a drama that was unlike anything else I've ever seen. I mean, even though, like I say, there are some similarities to his other films, in particular, even a little bit of Eraserhead, Lost Highway for sure, and Mulholland Drive a little bit. There was some imagery and things that the techniques were similar, but of course always unique and different in every film. And I just got to say, if you haven't seen Inland Empire ever or lately, you're probably going to have to see it on a home screen theater. So hopefully it's a big one and a nice one where you can turn out all the lights, have it very dark, and really absorb yourself in this movie. I think you will enjoy the experience if you like films that are not conventional, mainstream type, Hollywood type formula movies that I despise. This film is true art. If they at the Academy Awards, they ought to have a film every year that they recognize for the most artistic film. And I think every year that David Lynch put a movie out, his film would probably win every year. Just like the year Stanley Kubrick put films out, his probably would have won. But these men were filmmakers, auteurs that knew how to create a movie experience that's entertainment, but also stimulates your intellectual side and your emotional side, your your intuitive side that can recognize there's much more to life than just what we see on the physical plane. There's just a whole other dimension that most of the time we ignore and miss just because we're so focused on the ephemeral and the what's right in front of us instead of looking a little deeper and beyond. And that's what David Lynch does. He goes right to the heart of the matter. He cuts really deep. And I just got to tell you, I'm really excited to have seen this film, Inland Empire. I cannot recommend it enough for you. So there you go. That's my review for tonight. David Lynch, Inland Empire. Wish my thumb was bigger.